Welcome to the easier way to sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the easier way to sell, Ike Krieger.
Hey, this is Ike Krieger. Welcome back. This episode will be informative and should be entertaining. That's because our guest is an informative and entertaining man. I'm talking about Andrew Sokol. And before we bring Andrew on for his interview, I'd like to follow up right where we left off with your learning the Prelude. Your assignment was to learn the first part, and today we're going to layer on the second part of the Prelude. So enjoy the episode. Last episode, we went over the first portion of the Prelude, and you had an assignment to memorize that first portion. Let's go back over that assignment right now. Here's the Prelude. I'd like to begin with a brief conversation to see if there's a fit between what you might need and what we provide. And with your permission, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, and you might have some for me. And within a few minutes, we'll probably know whether or not there's a reason to move forward. Is that an okay way to start? WFA. Wait for answer. Wait for an answer, maintain eye contact, and smile. It's important that you remember you can say anything you want to anybody with a smile on your face. You can tell somebody that they have something stuck in their teeth as long as you have a smile on your face. When you make your request of the prospect after the first portion of the Prelude, the prospect will invariably say, yes, it's okay to start that way. Now, before I share with you what you're going to add on to what you've memorized from the last episode, and I'm saying that with a smile on my face, if you really want to learn the system and you haven't completed the assignment from the last episode, and if you haven't memorized the Prelude, what I'd really like you to do is stop the podcast and take the 10 minutes that is needed to learn that first portion of the Prelude. Now, if you find that inconvenient, I'm urging you to listen to the remainder of this episode and, in a quiet moment later on in the day, go back and learn the first portion of the Prelude. All right, now that you've learned the first portion of the Prelude, here is the second portion. And if anywhere along the line you come to the conclusion that what we provide is not what you're looking for, how comfortable are you telling me that? And remember, if you find the pace of this type of learning process slower than you would like, you always have the option of going back and listening to episodes 1 through 10, and specifically the episodes entitled The Secrets of the System Parts 1, 2, and 3. Listen to those and absorb the information at a rate compatible with your personal learning strategy. But if your strategy requires or just functions best with slow and steady coaching, I invite you to follow the instructions that I've been giving and memorize what I assign. If that's who you are, let's make an agreement that you'll learn the system using this piece-by-piece approach, and what I'll get out of it is that it'll make me happy. So let's go back over it. I'd like to begin with a brief conversation to see if there's a fit between what you might need and what we provide. And with your permission, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, and you might have some for me. And within a few minutes, we'll probably know whether or not there's a reason to move forward. Is that an okay way to start? Wait for answer. You've completed the first portion of the Prelude. It's time for the next piece of the conversation. And if anywhere along the line, or if anywhere during our conversation, you come to the conclusion that what we provide isn't what you need, how comfortable are you telling me that? Wait for answer. You now say, some people are just uncomfortable saying no thank you, so they end up using substitutes like maybe or I'll think about it. I'd like to avoid maybe or I want to think about it as a substitute for a real no. Is that okay with you? Let's do it again. I'd like to begin with a brief conversation to see if there's a fit between what you might need and what we provide. And with your permission, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, and you might have some for me. And within a few minutes, we'll probably know whether or not there's a reason to move forward. Is that an okay way to start? Wait for an answer. And remember, when you're in a prospect's office and you finish the first part of the prelude, avoid saying, wait for an answer. That was a joke. Here's the second part. And if anywhere during our conversation you come to the conclusion that what I provide isn't what you need, how comfortable are you telling me that? Wait for an answer. Some people are uncomfortable just saying no thank you, so they end up using a substitute like maybe or I want to think about it. I'd like to avoid maybe or I want to think about it as a substitute for a real no. Is that okay with you? Okay, that's it. Keep building the muscle of learning. Learn the prelude. In our next episode, we'll be adding another layer to the prelude. Your assignment? Memorize everything we've covered up till now. I've received a couple notes asking me if I still do personal training, personal coaching. Let's put the cost of that coaching on a side burner for a second. My precondition for coaching would be you making contact with me at closethedealwithoutselling@gmail.com and explaining to me why you'd be a good candidate for one of the very few time slots I might make available. Okay? In my conversation with Andrew Sokol, we touch on sales, we touch on communication, and we touch on marketing. And you and I really haven't talked a lot about marketing, so let's clarify that term. And in the book Guerrilla Marketing by J. Conrad Levinson, he says, marketing is everything you do to promote your business, from the moment you conceive of it to the point at which customers buy your product or service and begin to patronize your business on a regular basis. The key words to remember are everything you do and on a regular basis. The meaning is clear. Marketing includes the name of your business, the determination of whether you'll be selling a product or a service, the method of manufacture or servicing, the colors, the size, and shape of your product, the packaging, the location of your business, the advertising, the public relations, the sales training, the telephone inquiries, the problem solving, the growth plan, and the follow-up. If you gather from this that marketing is a complex process, you're right. The selling and marketing of your product or service is complex. And as an aside, with today's social media and internet marketing, things have gotten even more complex. We'll discuss a different way to look at marketing in this interview. Enjoy.
It sounds like we're trying to sell something, though. It's like, so sign up, what's preventing you? Get out your checkbooks. But that's why I asked, is this free? So, maybe we should both, and it's free. So that's what's amazing. I could even do that and compliment you for the fact that, why don't I do that? Because I get the feeling like it feels like we're trying to sell something when really we're not. There's just something that's available.
Say that. Well, hello. This is the interview that I promised you would be something that you'd be able to use right away. Not only is Andrew Sokol a former student of mine, one of my early students, not only is Andrew a former business partner where we work together in helping people be better at sales and marketing, but this is a guy who has studied marketing and branding in a way that I think it could make a big difference for you and your business. But being selfish, I want to have you all to my own for you to talk about the system, at least at first. And before that, I want to say, welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Ike. It's nice to be talking to you again.
It's nice to be talking to you. If it's okay, I'd like to start out with you telling me what it was about sales and selling and what you were doing that got you involved with the system in the first place?
Well, one of the things I understood early on is that everything is sales. And so the better you can be at sales, the better you can be at everything, essentially. And I had taken other courses. I had read a lot of books. And you and I met at a networking event, I believe, in Los Angeles. And you were talking to others and stood up in front of the group and talked a little bit about your system. And I was intrigued. So I signed up for more than one of your courses and was hooked and found the system remarkably valuable. And I've been using it ever since. It was a learning curve. It continues to be. But now my entire communication, not only in terms of sales, but with people in all facets of my life, has changed. I use the system really almost automatically now and has made me a far more effective communicator.
Just this past week, I was looking at a way of communicating the system to people so that they didn't at first think of it as something that had to do with, you'll excuse the expression, sales. And I realized that for the last 30 years, I've been talking about this as a way to be more effective at selling, and now obviously as an easier way to sell. And I realized that what you just said about it working for you in all areas is because it's a conversation. It gives you a doorway to having a conversation about anything, not just sales. It just works well in a conversation called sales. And I'm wondering if you have any feedback on that idea about it just being a really good way to have a conversation that happens to work in other areas of your life.
I think that's an important thing to stress, because when people think about sales training, they think about techniques like tie downs and, always be closing and things that you need to say to manipulate customers into nodding yes while you're talking to them and all the traditional techniques that we learn. But this goes far beyond that. This is not just sales techniques. This is communication methods. And that's why it can apply to all aspects of life. It just happens to work extremely well in sales. As you can imagine, if you become a better communicator, you're going to become better at selling. And as a result of that, it makes selling much easier and less stressful. And you made an interesting point about being able to discuss anything with anybody. I feel like I can walk into a room and talk to anybody, regardless of whether or not I have anything in common with them, because of two of the most fundamental aspects of the system. One is listening, which is kind of, I don't think that's an intuitive impression that people have when you talk about sales techniques. Most people, I think, instantly begin thinking about scripts and talking. But one of the single most important aspects of the technique that you teach is learning to be a good listener. And then the second most important aspect is asking questions. And if you can do those two things, you can have a conversation with anybody, regardless of whether or not you have anything in common or know anything about the subject they're discussing. And they'll come away thinking you're a fantastic conversationalist because you've listened to them and asked them relevant questions. And how many people in life do you talk to where you really feel like you were listened to and they were engaged? Those are some important counterintuitive things that the system really does that makes it so effective.
And before we find out what you've been doing recently, I am interested in you sharing what it was about the system that offered you the greatest challenge and how it affected you and how you overcame that.
The biggest challenge was doing it, starting. For two reasons, and we may talk about this later. I found that, over the course of my career, I've been in a situation where I've had to train salespeople, and I've called on the system and tried to help other people use it in sales. And they, like when I started, have the biggest trouble just doing it. And at the beginning, I failed. I had my own business at the time, and part of that business involved selling and getting clients. And when I started using the techniques, I really did not do well. I lost a lot of clients. I flubbed. I had to go through some failures before I could really get comfortable with the system, which is natural. Once I hit my stride, I started having record months and record years, and I've never looked back.
It goes back to unconscious competence.
Right.
Where you're doing it and you're not thinking about it. And it's such a challenge to get it through people's head that it's no different than being great at the violin. No matter how gifted somebody is, they still had to try, to learn, to fail, to succeed, just like that baby learning how to walk. You just had to keep doing it until it became second nature, or what we call unconscious competence. So many people, when they start this, immediately it's uncomfortable because it's a brand new learning process. And they may go, oh, I like to ask open-ended questions, but the rest of it, it's so much work. Yeah, I think we are in agreement of what challenge most people face. How did you get over it?
There's two answers to that question. One is getting back to the obstacles that I found when I was starting. And this is a big obstacle when I'm training other people, is when I discuss these techniques with people, everyone to a person nods and smiles and says, yeah, that's smart. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I get it. And then a week later, if I'll listen to their phone calls or we'll talk in a meeting, they won't have implemented any of it. And the most common reason I hear for that is, well, it feels uncomfortable. It's awkward. And what I've come to, and so I encourage anybody who tries using these techniques not to let that stop you. Anytime you're learning new habits, new techniques, whatever it is, it's uncomfortable. That's what learning is. You're rewiring your brain, and that's a bit of an uncomfortable thing. I was able to get over it because I've learned other things, music, sports. I've been in situations, languages. I've been in other situations where I've learned how to learn, and I've learned what it feels like to learn. And I'm familiar with that discomfort. What I've come to discover is that a lot of adults haven't done that. If you ask adults, have you ever learned a musical instrument? A lot of them will say no. Have you ever learned a foreign language? A lot of them will say no. Have you ever learned a sport or any skill that took practice and a certain amount of being uncomfortable in the beginning process? And a lot of them will say no. So when they first try to use these techniques and they find this discomfort that they've never had before, a lot of them won't push through it and end up quitting. So that's the answer to your question, is I got through it because I recognized that feeling of discomfort, and I understood that that was part of the learning process. To anybody who's trying to implement your methods, I would encourage them to understand that that's just what learning is like, and to push through it. It will get more comfortable, and the rewards are well worth it.
Tell me what got you into the marketing side of the communications business, and what led you to come up with the branding ideas that you created. How did you get into that side of the sales and marketing industry?
I became very interested in advertising, and I started to pursue advertising courses. I got a job. My first job was at the CBS television affiliate in the marketing department in San Diego. And during my early career, I discovered a book, which to me was really the keystone, the cornerstone of my career, and I recommend it to anybody interested in marketing. It's a classic now. I think it's just celebrated its 40th anniversary. It's called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind. And reading that book was really an aha moment for me. It's written by two guys, Al Reese and Jack Trout. And after reading that, I devoured all of their books. And it really shifted my perception of how marketing works until today, where my approach to marketing and branding is somewhat different from other experts I've heard, and I think a lot more effective. And I bring that to bear when I go into companies and help them either turn them around or help them grow.
You came up with an idea called backward marketing. You developed this out of your reading and your research. Briefly tell us a little bit about backward marketing.
Well, the mistake I see most businesses make, big and small, is they start to implement tactics for their marketing and advertising. And by tactics, I mean things like, it could be podcasts, it could be YouTube videos, it could be television commercials, it could be radio commercials, it could be magazine ads, whatever, social media marketing, whatever it happens to be. They start implementing their tactics without really having them revolve around a particular strategy. And that's what I call backward marketing. It's beginning your tactics before you have a strategy. To me, that's backwards. The place to start is with a strategy. And then once you develop a strategy, then that will guide and inform all of the tactics and how you should be implementing and what your message should be and what media you should be using and what your target market should be and all of the most important critical aspects of your tactics. Without a strategy, you're just throwing darts and hoping something sticks. But if you have a strategy that guides what it is you're doing, you'll be far more effective and efficient and get the kind of results that you're looking for. And by strategy, very briefly, what I mean is starting with a evaluation of the market, and in particular, the competition. Most companies, again, get this backwards. They look inward and think in terms of what they're good at and why their product is good, and then they try to deliver that message to the world. To me, that's backwards. The first thing to do is to look out at the world and see what the marketplace is like, what the competition is doing, and where the opportunities are that aren't already being taken by the competition. And then once you figure out what those opportunities are, you can determine what your messaging should be and how you should message. But a perfect analogy for anyone into sports is imagine you're a football player and you're really good at running to the right. You're comfortable running to the right. You've scored most of your touchdowns running to the right. You can break to the right very quickly. That's always been your most successful and comfortable move, is running to the right. And you're in the middle of a game and there's a long kick and you drop way back and you catch the ball. So what's the first thing that you do?
I would run to the right because that's what I do.
Right. And that would be a mistake. The first thing any good football player does is they look down the field to see where the opportunities are. Because if you just catch the ball and think to yourself, well, I'm good at running to the right, so I'm going to run to the right, and you don't look to see if there's defenders coming toward you from the right, you're going to run into big trouble. And that's what most businesses do. They consider what they're good at, and they just start running down the field without first looking to see where the opportunities are. Because if the field is wide open to the left, then obviously that's where you want to go. So that in a nutshell is what I believe the most effective approach to marketing is, starting with an evaluation of the marketplace, where the opportunities are, then developing your strategy based around that, and then implementing the tactics, your go-to-market messaging, regardless of the medium that you're using.
I like to bring these interviews to a close, asking my guest what they would say to someone, to you, who might be saying to themselves, I sure want to learn this, but I don't know. So I hate to put you on the spot, Andrew. What would you tell them?
Well, I guess the real question is, why wouldn't you? Anything that anyone can do, I know anything that I can do that improves my ability to communicate with people only improves my life, not only financially and in terms of business, but personally as well. And I guess the only thing that people might be thinking to themselves, the only reason that they might not do it is because it takes work, like anything else. This late in life, I'm beginning to learn the piano. It's something I've always wanted to do, and it takes work. It's a love-hate relationship, and it's not really any different than the system. It's going to be, for some people, it will be a love-hate relationship. Sometimes you will try using these things and you'll flop. Other times you will notice results and you'll giggle to yourself because it's amazing how powerful these communication techniques are, how you can guide conversations and lead them to either an outcome that you want, or you can terminate conversations if it looks like we're going to lead to an outcome that you're not looking for, but you have the choice and the ability to do that once you have tools that make you a communication ninja, which is really what this does for you. They're not tricks. Again, it really gets back to listening and asking questions. Those are the two keys. And you just have to ask yourself, there was a period of time when I traveled the world, and to help supplement my income during that time, I taught English. And I met a lot of people who wanted to know English. They wanted to speak English. But that's a lot different from wanting to learn English. That requires a certain amount of time every day, a certain amount of experimentation, a certain amount of practice, a certain amount of risk, a certain amount of speaking the language with other people when there's the chance you might embarrass yourself or say something wrong. And the same is true with the system. Everybody wants to know it. That's a little different from wanting to learn it. If you're willing to commit, and it's not hard, it's fun, but it does take practice and time and the willingness to try it even when it's uncomfortable, to take risks that you might not get the outcome you're looking for right away. But just like the pitcher, who's a great pitcher and is trying to put some new techniques into his pitching style, there may be some awkward moments. And if you can get through those, you'll find that this is a lifelong, valuable communication system.
So, Andrew, tell me, if you were saying to someone right now, you should really do this, and here's the reason why, give me one or two reasons.
Well, hell, I had to pay for it back when I did it. You and
my wife thanks you.
Oh yeah, that trip you took to China. You can thank you for that. It's amazingly generous of Ike to be making this available to anybody for free, and so there really is nothing to stop you from doing it other than your own resistance. Yeah, jump on board. Why not? And have some fun with it.
What a great way to end a great conversation. Tell me what you'd like to say in closing. I want to hear it.
There is no there. Life is a process, and learning the system is a process. And there is no end to the journey. The question is, do you want to take the first step on the path and beyond the journey? And if you decide that you do, I think you'll find it's a pretty amazing trip.
Andrew, thanks for being on.
Thank you, Ike.
Take care. I personally enjoyed that episode. And I really want to thank my former student, my former business partner, and my current friend, Andrew Sokol. I'd like to leave you with something that I've been hearing since I was a child in school. And I think that it will ring true to you also, and that's do your homework. And I want you to know that I had a smile on my face when I said that. This is Ike Krieger. See you next time.